Story 1. I was tidying up my kitchen when I found my epinephrine pen trainer. I absent-mindedly jammed it into my thigh and discovered it was not the training pen. My heart rate skyrocketed, and I paced outside, debating going to the emergency room. I do not remember how long I thought I might die, walking around in small circles. Story 2. When I was 10, my cousins and I were shooting bottle rockets at each other and accidentally set a wheat field on fire. We were freaking out, trying to figure out how to put it out and not get in trouble. I had the bright idea to run to the creek. We did not have any buckets, so we filled our mouths with dirty creek water and ran back and forth spitting on the fire. My cousin thinks he swallowed a tadpole. Story 3. My Uncle James is a generous fellow. He gave me a beautiful hand-built kayak and a sailing canoe to make room for his newest canoe in his garage. Even though I have a large pickup, I really didn't realize how long these things were. I got them home safely, but it was a challenge. Fast forward to this spring. The kayak went to a coworker and friend who really uses them more than I would, with my uncle's approval. The canoe needed to be brought 2 hours away to my parents' old place down the shore. To do this, I made some quick modifications to a utility trailer and strapped the canoe securely on it. It was definitely safer for a long drive, so I set off on a rainy Friday evening. It was taking a lot longer than expected with backups at Sandy Point, you know the routine. With the trailer, I rode the right lane and just waited it out. Once I got on the bridge, I noticed that I could no longer see the end of the canoe in my rearview mirror. I wasn't worried that I had lost the canoe, but I knew something wasn't right. I got off the bridge on Kent Island and pulled over. It was there and fine. It was just dipping down because I had loaded the canoe upright on the trailer, and it was filling with rainwater. So I had to stop 3 more times to bail it out on the way down. Dumbass. Did make it safe and sound. Story 4. My friend and I were lighting small fireworks in the street behind his house. Smoke bombs, the little green whistling missiles, tanks, and snakes. We had what seemed like a brilliant idea at the time. We take a smoke bomb, set it off inside a Ziploc bag, then take it to the mall, throw it down, and disappear in a cloud of blue smoke like ninjas. We decided to try this in his basement. Smoke bombs have fuses that need to be lit. The fuse was lit and burning. We put the smoke bomb in the bag. Immediately, it burned through the bag and landed on his creamy white carpet, leaving a big blue stain that lasted for years. The basement filled up with smoke. His mom was not pleased, and his dad kept laughing at how dumb we were. Story 5. I named my son after my husband. Having the same name can cause problems with documents, mail, and the Internal Revenue Service. Story 6. When I was about 10, I walked out onto a frozen pond and threw a large rock ahead of me. Near the middle, the ice broke, and I went under. It was not a huge pond, but deeper than my height. I tried to swim up, but couldn't find the hole in the ice. Eventually, I reached a thin spot, punched through the ice, hauled myself out, and walked home dripping wet through the snow. Story 7. That town in Oregon that put a bunch of dynamite into a beached whale and exploded it. Chunks of dead whale rained down all over the town for minutes after the explosion. Story 8. Burning a recliner on a bonfire. Furniture contains a lot of metal and gives off noxious fumes, which can be harmful. Story 9. Not me, but my grandfather. My mom would not stop talking about owning a horse. She really wanted to be that blonde-haired, blue-eyed California girl with her own horse. My grandfather had the means to do it, but was also very cheap, so he got her a horse that spooked easily and would likely throw her off. Grandfather's plan? The horse would throw my mom off once. She would be over owning a horse, and he could sell it to someone more equipped to handle a horse than his airheaded teenage daughter. What actually happened? My mom got thrown off 6 times before she was over having a horse. Story 10. Many years ago, I was really high and, for reasons best known to myself at the time, I successfully bid for a fully serviceable Rolls-Royce Avon jet engine on eBay. Story 11. Backstory. I met my partner online and flew out to meet him after 6 months. I stayed for a week. On the second day of my visit, he learned that I had never shot a gun before and offered to teach me. Then he offered to bring his friend who has better guns for beginners like a bolt-action .22. I thought, sounds fun, and I get to meet more people in this guy's life. Why not? The next day, his friend came over. We bought some overripe Walmart fruit for targets and went out to public land. I was a terrible shot, as expected, but I had fun anyway and was thrilled to see more of the natural beauty the state is known for. All in all, it was a good time. A week later, I had gone home, and my partner met up with his friend again. The friend offhandedly said, "She must really like and trust you to be willing to go out into the backwoods with you. Some guy she barely knows, me, who she doesn't know at all, and a car full of guns." My partner went pale. He hadn't thought about how sketchy that situation sounded. And to be honest, neither had I. Naivety aside, I have since moved in with my partner, and it will be 8 years together this September. I am glad to report there have been no Dick Cheney-style accidents yet. Story 12. I design heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems for buildings. Developers often ignore my recommendations to save money. I charge them to fix issues that result from not following my advice. One of my favorite projects was designing a hookah lounge. Smoking lounges require a large amount of ventilation air. The ceiling was packed with ductwork. I had specified an expensive energy recovery ventilator to be installed in the room. The architect forwarded an email listing a used energy recovery ventilator for sale. The owner wanted to know if he could use that instead of a new one. I told him no, as it was too small and would not comply with code. It also lacked the correct components. I thought that was the end of the conversation. Months later, the architect asked me for a solution to a problem. The owner had purchased and installed the used energy recovery ventilator. While the site inspector was there, he asked to see the nameplate on the ventilator showing the model number and size. The contractor couldn't find it, so the inspector was about to give up and approve it. Then the contractor said, "I found it." The inspector examined it and failed the installation because the ventilator was too small. They should never have installed that unit, but they were almost in the clear. Story 13. Not mine, but my friend's niece. She's 14 and walking along the river with friends. She says it's been a while and they should probably start heading back. Her friend, bless this child's heart, says, "What do you mean? Rivers go in a circle and you end up at the beginning again." So the niece and the other friends argue with her insisting that every river is a lazy river. Finally, the other kids say, "Fine, you don't believe us? Let's keep walking then." By 11 at night, the sheriff's department was out searching for them, and the local news asked people to be on the lookout for the missing kids. By 1 a.m., there was a helicopter with a spotlight. The kids were getting eaten up by mosquitoes and found a deer stand to take cover for the night. That's where they were found. Additionally, the niece started her period in the middle of all of it, and one of the boys had to donate one of his shirts to use as a pad. That was 20 years ago. The kids were fine, but they really didn't think that through. Story 14. Once my husband and I tried to build a town called Wopflappy in a simulation city-style game. Everyone started dying from noise because we placed the wind turbines next to the houses. In the ensuing chaos, the game stopped everything and zoomed in to show an emergency vehicle trying to pick up a dying Wopflappian as it traveled through the town to make a U-turn. It was then that we realized we had not included cross streets. Poor Wopflappy deserved better. Story 15. I have a good story. My friends and I were at my house for a small party. There may have been some alcohol. One friend was feeling sick, so we all went into the bathroom to keep them company and sat on the edge of the bathtub. One by one, we all decided to lie back in the bathtub, backs against the bottom and feet over the side. It was quite comfortable until we realized we did not have enough space to twist and get out since there were 4 of us. Because we were lying flat with our backs completely against the bottom of the bathtub and not propped up, we could not sit up either. It took a lot of shouting to get help from another friend to pull one of us out, so the rest could turn sideways and sit up. Story 16. We went swimming in one of the man-made lakes that housing developments have, and we immediately got severe ear infections. Story 17. My family used to set off fireworks when we went camping. My uncle was always organized and careful about it, but once we forgot to bring a flashlight when setting them up away from the campsite. It was not a big deal until we got to a square-shaped one. It did not go off after the fuse burned down, so we thought it was a dud, but it was actually upside down. We realized this after several seconds of darkness, when a ball of fire shot out and started bouncing along the ground. All you could see was the silhouette of my uncle running away as fast as he could. Story 18. My friend and I couldn't get a fire going and didn't have lighter fluid, but we did have gasoline. I told him, "You only need a tiny splash, like a teaspoon at most." Then I heard, glug, glug, glug. I started backing away. He positioned himself so he could make a quick getaway. It was a good thing he did because for about a quarter of a second there was a giant fireball in front of us. Luckily, no one got hurt. Story 19. As a kid, some friends and I set a couch on fire that someone had dumped under our favorite tree. It was damp and starting to smell, so we thought we could just torch it and it would be gone. This was in the early 1980s, so that couch was likely from the 1970s or older, full of highly flammable foam. The couch went up like rocket fuel, and the fire quickly spread to our tree and the dead leaves. Soon, the empty lot was on fire, heading toward homes and a canyon. This was Southern California during fire season. Luckily, a fire truck arrived quickly. No homes were damaged, and surprisingly, the police believed us when we blamed the fire on a man flicking his cigarette into the bushes. Story 20. The time I bought a horse. The time I bought a boat. The time I bought a timeshare. This could get long. Story 21. Not me, but some guys in my class in high school back in the 2000s. We lived in a very small town in the South. Some guys were driving around when they saw a dead pig on the side of the road. They thought it would be funny to put the pig in the back of their truck, haul it across town, and leave it on the front porch of one of their friends' houses. What they didn't consider was that their friend's family was the only Jewish family in our small community. The parents discovered the pig and were rightfully angry because it was disgusting. They pressed charges for committing a hate crime, and the boys had to do many community service hours. Story 22. Shot a bunch of tannerite with a few friends. It felt like we set off a mini nuke, and the police came to my house. My dad drove my friends back to their houses before scolding me. Story 23. At my parents' house, there is a flight of stairs that goes straight down to the basement, carpeted thankfully. When I was a kid, a friend and I decided to go sledding down the stairs in pillowcases. It was not so bad until I decided to go face first in the pillowcase. I got a fat lip and lied to my mom, saying I fell down the stairs. She asked, "From which one?" And I pointed at one near the top. Story 24. We decided to camp at the festival grounds during Knotfest. The only food we took to this 3-day music festival was a family-sized bag of Doritos and $20. Story 25. On a school trip to Hungary, 10 students and 2 teachers attended. After dinner, our teachers returned to the hotel and left us in the city at around 10 in the evening. Shortly after they disappeared from sight, we realized none of us had a charged phone, but we believed we knew the way back to the apartment we had rented, so we decided it was fine. By the end of the night, 2 of us nearly fell into the Danube River. One person was scammed for wireless earbuds, another narrowly escaped being hit by a train, and someone twisted his ankle. To make matters worse, we took the wrong train and had to be guided back to the apartment by strangers. It was an eventful trip. Story 26. After a 14-hour continual movement, my platoon was ordered to take a long rest halt and establish a patrol base, which means dig in, prepare defenses, pull security, clean weapons, pretty much everything but rest. Part of preparing defenses is getting fighting positions ready. My platoon sergeant had us dig foxholes, which is unpleasant but necessary as part of our perimeter defense. My platoon leader, a lieutenant, wanted to relocate our patrol base slightly by moving us 15 feet from our current position. He decided to tell all of us this himself instead of running it down the chain of command and said, "Just move the hole." How do you move a hole, sir? 10 years later, this still bothers me, but at least I can laugh about it now, kind of. Story 27. My intoxicated girlfriends and I got into a white van because they promised to drop us off at Taco Bell. Story 28. In high school, before the advent of smartphones to look things up, my friends and I decided to try to go to a nightclub in Houston that several of our classmates had successfully entered. We dressed up, got into the car, and started driving into the city. About two-thirds of the way through Houston, we realized we had no idea where we were going and had no way to look up the location. We ended up driving across the city to Katy and ate chili cheese connies in the parking lot. Dressed to the nines. Story 29. Threw my fishing line over power lines, tried smashing a 12-gauge shotgun shell open with a brick, attempted to straighten my wonky toast in the toaster with a fork, extinguished smoldering sticks and petrol inside a jerry can, nearly crushed myself between a pole and a car after leaving it in drive by accident, and finally nearly had my head crushed between a forklift mast and a trailer pole. I am 22 now and making slightly better choices. I do not know how child me made it, but here I am. Story 30. One time, a friend called and asked if I wanted to join his friends on a road trip to Toronto to celebrate the new year. We lived in Illinois. I said yes, and we all piled into the car. When we hit the highway, someone thought to check the weather and discovered there was a blizzard in Toronto. So we took a different exit and headed south. We ended up in New Orleans at 11 p.m. that night and watched the ball drop. It was an awesome trip. Story 31. A father and son are fixing up a house. The father commits suicide in the house. The son sells the house and becomes homeless. The family blames the son instead of acknowledging depression or grief. Therapy follows. Story 32. Probably the time my friends and I decided to drive out to a field in the country, start a fire, put a propane tank in it, and shoot it with a semi-automatic carbine rifle. It shot out a blue flame about 30 feet and lasted what seemed like forever as we freaked out, eventually putting out the flame. It was a quiet ride home, but I recall watching a thunderstorm over the horizon and feeling some sort of peace. Story 33. Relevant information. This happened in the United States, in a very white location. It was nighttime. It was very dark and stormy. We wanted to give some money to someone we knew, Kay, who needed it, but did not want him to know it was coming from us because he kept saying thank you so much repeatedly, and it was annoying. So we, my wife and I, asked a friend, R, to help us out and put the envelope in Kay's mailbox, mail slot, or in front of his door. We did not know his apartment number, so mailbox was not an option. We needed a key to get into his building, so the front door was not an option either. But the apartment is on the ground floor. The plan was for R to go to the sliding patio door, knock, hand Kay the envelope, and if asked who he was or who the envelope was from, to say, "My employer wishes to remain anonymous. R is a brown immigrant to the United States on a very revocable study and work visa. But I have read Great Expectations, so I know mysterious benefactors are normal and people just kind of roll with it." R walked up to the door and knocked. There was no answer. The curtain was closed and the rain was loud. R knocked again, even harder, and looked in a kitchen window. Kay saw R and said, "Who are you?" R held out the envelope and said, "My employer wishes to remain anonymous." They went back and forth a couple of times until Kay said, "If you do not leave right now, I will call the police." R left the envelope and ran back to the car where my wife and I were waiting. About 5 minutes later, Kay called my wife, saying he recognized her handwriting and thanked her very much. My wife explained, "We did this exactly because you say thank you too much." Kay did not take the hint. We ended up just hanging up on him because he would not stop saying thank you. A few minutes later, R's girlfriend called R and asked what he had been up to. He told her our funny story about the adventure. She said, "R, what are you thinking? You were lucky you did not get shot or killed. People are going to think you are a terrorist. You could get deported for that kind of behavior." Story 34. I tried to touch my knee to my nose while hopping on one foot as a child. It went as you would expect. My husband and I used to use the withdrawal method. It worked fine for years. My toddler is 14 months old now and I have the arm implant. Story 35. One time, I tried to assemble a piece of IKEA furniture without reading the instructions properly. I was convinced I could figure it out by intuition. Spoiler alert, I couldn't. I spent hours struggling with screws and panels that didn't seem to fit. I ended up with a chair that was wobbly and missing a crucial part. Then I realized I had put one of the pieces upside down from the very beginning. After taking it all apart and reassembling it correctly, following the instructions. It only took me half the time and the chair was actually sturdy. Moral of the story: sometimes the simplest solution is just to read the manual. Story 36. I was building a fire in the Franklin stove in my parents' cabin. While doing this, I was sampling some of the bottles of alcohol they keep there. One was peppermint schnapps, quite likely purchased by my great-grandmother decades earlier. It was pretty high proof, and nobody knows how much stronger it had become over the years. It was not pleasant. I spat the mouthful out into the fire, inside the enclosed stove with the hole on top that I was looking down into. Fortunately, my husband thinks things through and acts quickly. He grabbed the back of my shirt and yanked me back as the fireball erupted. The ends of my hair swung forward and were burnt, but thankfully not my face or my eyes. It left a singe mark on the ceiling, which my mom was not thrilled about. My hair was quite frizzled. Story 37. You see, there was a failed businessman named Donald Trump who somehow became president of the United States. He had a plan or concepts of a plan. For what, you might be asking yourself? Well, for many things, supposedly. For some reason, those plans have not quite come together yet. Story 38. This is not my story, but I think it fits. For context, my grandmother was born in 1920. She had 2 older brothers and 2 younger sisters, the youngest being 10 years younger than her. When my grandmother was 12, it had rained a lot and a creek on their farm was flooded. Curious about how deep the creek was, the siblings used the youngest sister as a measure and dipped her in. My grandmother said it was lucky they did not let their sister go because the current was so strong she would have been swept away. They told the sister she had to stay in the fields until her dress dried or their mother would be mad at her. Story 39. In the year 2008, a significant story emerged in Iceland with a clear, "we did not think that through" vibe. The Independence Party and the Progressive Party did little or nothing to prevent the economic collapse. They were supported by coincidence theorists and justified their actions as progress, which contributed to weakening the country's infrastructure. Socialists were not of much help either. Those who tried to stop the collapse were labeled as conspiracy theorists and even called fringe cultists. If those who dreamed of turning Iceland into a prison had won the presidential election, there would be no way to travel freely between borders in Iceland. It was a time when the country tried to become a hive mind, which did not work because humans are not a hive collective. The ableist and ageist Independence Party ended up in opposition with barely 15% after supporting the taxi bill and an anti-health freedom bill. Another famous "we did not think that through" blunder from the Progressive Party. There is an even bigger example of "I did not think that through" than anything that has ever happened in Iceland, and that is Stephen King's decision to let the stand end the way he did. For many, this completely ruined the novel and is regarded as the biggest "I did not think things through" moment in the history of literature. Story 40. I worked for a company that made caustic solutions. The old factory where I worked had large steel mixing vessels that made my life very difficult. The steel eventually rusted, causing the particle count to increase. They were building a new facility in Singapore with another steel mixing vessel. I could not understand why they did not see the problems I faced every day trying to filter out all the rust. Story 41. When I was at school, I used to go to a film club with my friend. One week, it was canceled. We decided to walk back home but forgot to tell my mother, who was going to pick us up from the film club, what we were doing. We made it back and I waved goodbye to my friend as she returned home. Later, my mother arrived in her car, fuming because she had traveled down to the school to pick us up and we were not there. I am not surprised she was angry. Story 42. My stepdad and I were cutting up some wood scraps to burn on the porch of our house, which is on the 2nd floor and raised on stilts. We came to a piece of plywood. Normally, he overthinks everything, but this time he had the idea for me to stand on one end of the sheet while he jumped on the other end as it hung over the steps. When the board broke, he was still standing on the broken part and began to slide down the stairs. He tried to get off the sheet, but he slipped and rolled off the stairs. He only fell 1 story but landed face first on a metal canoe below. Now he has a small scar on his forehead like Harry Potter. Story 43. When I was in my late teens, I spent my summers working at a bar in a small vacation town in northern Michigan and living in my grandparents' and uncle's cottage. I would help with various labor around the house. One time, when all my uncle's college friends were around, we got drunk and decided to remove a boulder about the size of a dishwasher from the front yard. With the help of liquid courage, we decided the best course of action was to strap it with several ropes tied to my bicycle. After getting a running start, I ran out of rope, the rock one, and I flew over the handlebars. Everyone had a good laugh. We then decided to try again with my uncle's station wagon. The rock won again when the rope snapped, and my uncle had to replace the back window of the car. 20 years later, the house has been sold, but that rock is still there. Story 44. Getting married and forming a blended family quickly. After a few short months, it became apparent that my spouse was never going to put me first. Story 45. I had sex with my ex last night after she had been abusive for the past year. I definitely should not have done it. However, I do not feel as attached as I used to. I have been around girls who actually want to be with me, so it did not feel as satisfying. Story 46. I attempted walking down a flight of stairs in my house while simultaneously putting on a pair of shorts. My forward foot got caught in the leg, my body toppled over, I grabbed the banister, and ended up lying downward with my head toward the bottom step. Whoops, I probably could have died. Story 47. Throwing a 20-ounce bottle not full, maybe 4 ounces of gasoline on a fire in my backyard, along with everything else we threw on the fire over the years, and jumping over the 2 to 3 foot high flames. Story 48. Tried to move not one, but 2 different couches into my very old Boston area apartment located on the 3rd floor of a triple-decker without measuring every doorway and stairwell. Got one up 3 flights and inside the front door, but not through the living room door. The other couldn't make it past the 1st floor landing. Neither fit. Then, out of desperation and zero patience, I drove all the way to the IKEA in New Haven to pick up a modular sofa with a Toyota Camry. Took one look at the boxes and left with no couch, obviously. We didn't have a couch for about 3 months. Story 49. I was checking the last items I could take from the house I grew up in as second baggage. It never made it through, and I am still heartbroken. Never send anything valuable as checked baggage. Airlines do not care. Story 50. College crowd. College town. We were having a pig roast the next day. That required buying a slaughtered pig, renting a large charcoal grill, and spending the night cooking it and drinking. Unfortunately, it looked like rain that night, so we moved the grill to the front porch of the house my friends rented. It had a cement floor and a high ceiling. We put the charcoal in, lit it, and everything was good. Very low flame, and the ceiling wasn't even soot-covered. We put the pig on and cracked some beers. We made all of these decisions sober. Put lit charcoal under a wood roof, put pig over hot coals. When the fat started to render, somewhere near beer 3, the flames shot up and started licking the ceiling. Oh fudge. The charcoal grill didn't have handles. You shouldn't move it when it's full of hot coals. Duh. But we had to move this flaming pig carcass or be in the newspapers the next day. Baby Jesus was feeling gracious that night. For whatever reason, there was scrap lumber next to the house. We grabbed 2 2x4s, put one on either side of the grill, and carried it out like Indiana Jones' Ark of the Covenant. We successfully finished the pig and it was delicious, but we did attract some attention. A drunk sorority girl was walking home from a party and asked us what we were cooking. My friend replied, "The champagne of meats, Great Dane." She vomited while slop-stepping away. One of the best nights of my life. Story 51. Not me really, but I was playing with gas with a kid I knew and her older brothers. One of them decided to see if there was more gas in the tank, so he used a lighter. The whole thing blew up in his face. We ran off, then came back with a hose, doused him, and ran off again. This was back in the day before saline and other treatments. I learned years later that if we hadn't acted, he would have had burn scars for his whole life. Story 52. I was about 19 and happened to have a clown costume at home. My mom offered for me to entertain kids at a birthday party because a coworker's child was turning 4 and she had very limited funds. The party was in the house and yard of a manufactured home lot. This was in the late 90s, so there were lots of kids aged 1.5 to preteen, along with many adult family members. It was a classic cake, ice cream, and piñata party. There was a bit of a language barrier, but laughter is universal. I knew a little Spanish, and many parents were able to translate. There was also a little deaf girl, somewhere between 5 and 7 years old, and I knew more sign language than Spanish, though I was slow with finger spelling. Everyone ate some cake. Then the birthday child's mom pulled me aside to bring the kids out for piñata time. The setup was very make it work, with a rope over a branch and a dad pulling the piñata around. The yard was not very large, and I had concerns about child safety. These fears intensified when I saw the piñata bat was a full-size shovel with the spade part unscrewed. I made rules. All kids had to stay behind this line, out of shovel range, until I brought them forward and put a blindfold on them. Everyone got 3 swings and needed to stop after 3 swings. When candy fell, no one could go after it until I did a countdown. The birthday child went first, followed by a handful of other kids. I reminded each before they started, 3 swings only. Then it was the 5-year-old girl's turn. I reminded her of the 3 swings, and she nodded, ready to go. I led her forward, put the blindfold on her, and handed her the death stick. About 6 wild swings later, the other kids were cowering in fear or jumping and screaming at her to stop. I thankfully managed to snag the death stick mid-swing to stop her, with no help from any of the laughing parents, including my own mother. Story 53. When I was about 8, I was walking on a frozen lake with 5 other kids, all between the ages of 7 and 13. I saw my sister face down on the ice. It appeared she was licking the ice, so I suggested we all do it too. All 5 of us lay down and licked the frozen lake while my sister was just blowing her nose. Story 54. 9 years old, riding down a hill on my bicycle. I thought to myself, why don't I ever use the front brakes? About half an hour later, a neighbor came out and walked me home with my bloody nose. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.